Let me say what a pleasure it is to be with you, and boy, we've got a great audience, all different ages and places and space. I'm going to spend a good bit of time talking to the young men in here. Boy, you are signs of hope. You are signs of hope not only for your families, but your community, but this country as well. And the function of hope is to always keep present realities open for future possibilities. We live in a world where tremendous numbers of people need to know that tomorrow can be different from today. You're signs of hope, you're agents of hope, and you're a foretaste of help as well. Then I see my buddy up there. How are you doing? This is a Trip from Manlius Military Academy, one of the great men that I admire in this Trip Billingsley in this country. So anyhow, very thrilled to be with you. Let me just tell you a couple quick things. One, I'm the product of the 1960s. So I was in high school and college right at the convergence of the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the whole war on poverty. And I think as a nation we started to ask all the right questions about what is the role of race and class and gender and sexual orientation as it speaks to inherent values. I think we asked questions earnestly in America almost 50 years ago. But we still live in a world filled with racism and sexism and all kinds of isms that marginalize and minimalize other human beings. So I've been working on social justice issues for almost 4 decades now in the church, on the streets, and in the world of sports. Second thing about me, you know, as Coach Smart said, and I will say this, I'm a huge Coach Smart VCU fan. I think America needs Coach to be successful, because he does it all the way. And there's 2 kinds of coaches in this world. There are transactional coaches that basically use young people for their own identity, their own validation, their own empowerment. And then we have a handful of coaches that are going to use the power platform to change the arc of every young person's life. Boy, Coach Smart has figured out, his players, how to build better men, make sure they get education. So I'm very honored to have him introduce me. So then I played 13 years professionally. In my last 5 years, I went to seminary. I retired from football, finished up seminary, and then my wife and I moved into one of the poorest communities in Baltimore, Maryland, a distressed community, objective and psychological poverty. Started working on issues of mercy and food and shelter, and dealt with evictions, and created after-school programs for kids that were locked in a school system that couldn't provide the resources and access to allow them to optimize their human potential. And no child in America in 2015 should the geography of where they're born ever dictate their destiny. Then saw that ghettos in America were man-made. They were constructed on bad public policy and prejudice. They were designed to deny certain people access and opportunity in this country. And my thinking is if they were man-constructed, therefore they could be deconstructed. So spent years working on systemic racism, housing, economic development. I was about 3 or 4 years into my work when it suddenly dawned on me. You know, there's an even greater crisis in this country. There's a crisis in America that's foundational to just about every psychosocial problem we have. And if you don't address this issue, you can't deal with all the problems in this country. And to me, the single greatest crisis in America today is the crisis of masculinity. It's a crisis about how does a boy know when he's become a man? What are the values, what are the virtues that describe some kind of authentic masculinity? And I would ask each of you as men and women, in your own minds, how do you define masculinity? As men in here, what's the clear, compelling definition that drives your own masculine soul as you move out into this world? As coaches, as parents that have a power and authority over young people, well, what is that definition we're going to give and model young boys if we're ever going to raise a generation of boys into healthy men? So started working on issues of masculinity, then saw right behind the crisis of masculinity is a growing crisis on the issue of femininity and womanhood. And again, how does a girl know when she's become a woman? What are those values? What are those virtues? What's some clear, compelling definition that's going to guide every young woman's feminine soul as she matriculates in this university and out into the world? Then came to the conclusion, after working on those issues, there's probably not a better venue in America to bring about social change and the healthy development of boys and the men and girls and the women than through sports, redeemed sports. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. Really want to talk about education-based athletics. I think we have to redeem sports from this win-at-all-cost kind of mentality in order to be able to build moral, ethical, social, emotional development into every student athlete. And somehow I think we need to take back from this win-at-all-cost and get it connected to education. So this is the formula for change, and for all of you that are coaches, I think whenever you come to some kind of workshop, you always want to figure out what it is you want to change. So change equals discontent times vision times first steps greater than resistance. So I think every one of us that are coaches, parents, we're always constantly doing our own work as student athletes. So first of all, we've got to figure out what is it that we're discontent with, or what's the missing piece in our life, what's the missing piece in our relationship with ourselves, with each other, coaches to their players. Then you've got to have some kind of vision. What is it that you're striving for? What is the maximum? How do you create the preferred world that you want to create? And then you've got to figure out first steps. And I think every coach, every year, you've got to add one or two things to your coaching repertoire. You can't just repeat one experience 20 times. There always need to be different, and you need to keep adding. Then you've got to figure out what is the resistance. My experience, most of the resistance that keeps us from changing is seldom institutional or bureaucratic. It usually has to do with our own personal comfort zone. Many of us have a great deal of difficulty out of stepping outside of who and what we think we are. But the magic in life, all the magic takes place when you step outside of your comfort zone. Many of us won't even attempt or try to coach or parent or be students in a new or different way if it makes us feel uncomfortable. Now, I'm going to say something tonight that's going to make you uncomfortable. And in your own mind, you're going to say, yeah, but. Yeah is to get me to stop talking, and but is to change the subject. You get to a yeah, but kind of moment, boy, don't just blow me off. You need to hunker down and make the connections of why that would push your comfort zone the way that it does. So change equals discontent times vision times first steps greater than resistance. I'm going to just go through that. So this is the science behind inside-out coaching. My wife is a psychotherapist, been in practice for almost 40 years. All of our friends say I drove her into that field. I think there's a certain amount of truth to that. But much of the work that we do is around a thing called attachment theory. Attachment's the capacity to build and maintain relationships. 40 years ago, there was a psychoanalyst working in Great Britain, what we then called juvenile delinquents. Started to make the connection between the way those children were parented, early exposure to violence, to their outcome. Ending up asking the question, why is it that some parents have the ability to allow their children to attach to them in a way that optimizes their child's intellectual, social, and emotional development? Why do some parents have that capacity and others don't? 30 years of research came back and said the single biggest predictor of a parent's ability to optimize the human potential of their child is when they've made sense out of their own life, when you have a coherent narrative, when you've integrated the good, the bad, and the ugly and have this correct autobiographical data and history. What the research showed was it didn't matter how suboptimal or abusive your own childhood might have been, you weren't destined to repeat that in the lives of your children once you made sense out of your own life. My wife and I took that research and it said if that's true in parent-child, then it's got to be true in player-coach, leader-follower. The single biggest predictor for all of us to build meaningful, lasting, transformative relationships is all of us got to make sense out of our own life. So the young men, I want you to just kind of figure out how this stuff is impacting you today. For the adults, for the parents here, don't think about your children. Think about how these issues have impacted your own self-understanding, how you see yourself. Because all of us got to make sense out of our own life. And as the young men in here, young women, all of us got to self-define. Nobody gets to define you. You define yourself. And every man has to define what he's going to stand for, who he's going to stand with, and what he's going to stand against. But this culture does not define you. Other people don't define you. You have to define your own value worth, what you're going to stand for in life as well. So the way that you build a coherent narrative is through a thing called mindsight. Only human beings have the ability to look into our own minds. And in our mind is a lifetime collection of all the relationships, all the experience, the feelings, thoughts, sensations that you have accumulated for a lifetime. I'm going to take you on a mindsight journey around your own issues of masculinity and femininity tonight. And you need to rethink about your own, how these issues have impacted you so you can have your own self-definition. So I'm not going to show that because there's kids here, but that's my coherent narrative. And I was one of those boys that had a tremendous amount of difficulties and challenge in life. What I did was I had to make sense out of my own life. And I had an awful lot of issues to deal with. Experienced abuse, had a huge father wound, a number of issues. I had to make sense out of that life. So the first chapter of my book, I wrote out my life. Integration leads to coherence. Coherence leads to healthy relationships. Then what I did was I took every coach I ever played for from the age of 10 to 37 years old. And then I graded every one of those coaches. What did I learn? What did I wish I hadn't learned? What developmental need was met? What developmental need was ignored? Then what I did is I took my sports narrative and I overlaid it over my life narrative. And I wanted to see the roles that coaches could have or did have in my own life. And my conclusion was there's two kinds of coaches. Well, there are transactional coaches that are just motivated by their own self-interest. They function from some quid pro quo. If you meet my needs, my desires, my demands, then I'll give you some kind of plaudit, some kind of playing time, some kind of praise. Transactional coaches are always focused on themselves first, their win-loss record second, and meeting the needs of the players is somewhere way down the line. Boy, this win-at-all-cost kind of culture has created tremendous problems. Then I saw I had three coaches in my life that were totally transformational. They understand the power, the platform, the position they have in the lives of young people, and they're going to use that to change the arc of every young person's life. They're always motivated by their own social, moral, ethical values and vision for life. Their players' human development, launching them, that's their first and foremost need. So with a transformational coach, they always get their needs met by meeting the needs of their players. I would say Coach Smart, in my opinion, boy, is rarefied air as a Division I college basketball coach in this country. So all of us, I think, the coaches in the room, all of us are on some kind of continuum between transacting and transforming the lives of our players. And the key comes down to this motivation of why do you coach? Is it about you or is it about your players? Transactional coaches do nothing but monitor young people. They move them from drill to drill, game to game, season to season, no relationship, no impact. Transformational coaches, they're going to be mentored. They build one-on-one relationship based on their own moral, ethical values, and they're going to impact that and imprint that on all of their players. So Hermitage High School, boy, you've got transformational coaches, man, and you ought to just be thankful for the privilege and the opportunity for play for them, and I'm thrilled you're here.